Hi, my name is Stewart Lynch, and in this video I'm going to take a look at a new feature introduced to SwifUI in iOS 15, and that is swipe actions on a list. In addition, we'll be embracing the MVVM design pattern, and we'll explore, in addition, the ability to reorder rows in the list, as well as enumerate the list so that you get a number displayed for each row. Now, before I get started, let me request that if you enjoy the video, please leave a comment below and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Make sure you ring the bell to be notified of new videos. And if you want to support my work, well, you can buy me a coffee. If this is something you want to learn, then keep watching. I do have a starter project for this video, and it's available for download from the link in the description below. I encourage you to download it and code along with me, because in the end, you'll have a reference project for everything that we learn. So as you can see, we're using the iOS 15 target, so make sure you have Xcode 13 or higher. The content view is left unchanged, but I have added another file that is a model for an object called a person, and I have a static array of my relations that is just a number of person objects. In the asset folder, I've included something for my launch screen, and I have a custom app icon, so it'll be recognizable on your home screen. So the first thing we are going to do is to modify the My Relations app where the app starts, and I want to embed the content view itself within a navigation view. And this will ensure that all views subsequently will be embedded in the navigation stack, and there'll be no need to add that in subsequent views. So first, let's create a PersonListViewModel. So we'll create a new file, and we're going to add a class of that name and make sure that it conforms to the Observable Object Protocol. And we're using a view model here because we're going to use the MVVM design pattern on our list. So the first thing we're going to need is an array of person to display in the list, and that will be a publish property, and we'll initialize it as an empty array. However, when our view first appears, we're going to want to assign to relations all of my relations, that static array. So we'll create a function for that we'll call getRelations, and we'll assign relations that person.myRelations. Now in content view, we'll need to have access to that view model, so we'll create a state object that will be private, and we'll call it viewModel and instantiate a PersonListViewModel. Now we're going to replace the current content with a list. And within that list, we're going to iterate through each of the viewModel relations with a for each loop. And then within each for each loop, we will present an H stack, where the first item in the H stack is going to be a text view using the relation emoji, and we'll increase its size by setting its font to a large title. And we'll follow that with a other text view that will be the relation.name. Now, nothing's going to show on our preview until we fetch that sample data. And we can do that with a task method attached to our list. And that task is going to be our viewModel's getRelations. Now, we want to see what it's going to look like inside a navigation view because we know that it's coming directly from our app that is embedded in a navigation view. So we'll embed our preview as well inside a navigation view. And then we can add a navigation title to the list. And we'll just call it My Relations. Now I want an edit button on my toolbar, so I'm going to create a toolbar. And that toolbar will have one toolbar item where the placement is going to be the navigation bar trailing. And the content of that toolbar item is just going to be an edit button. Let's test. Well, nothing really happens here except when I tap the button, the edit label changes to done, and when I tap it again, it reverts back to edit. So let's do something about that. First, we'll add an onMove method to the objects in the for each loop. And that's going to provide us with the index set and the index. And once we have that, we can move our relation. So within the method, we can go viewModel.relations.move, and it's going to require the from offsets, which is our index set, to another offset, which is our index. If we test this, when I tap the edit button, I can see that I can now rearrange our rows. And when I tap on done, they're fixed in that new arrangement. Let's add an onDelete method to that for each loop. This time we get an index set. And we can use that index set to remove from the relations at the offset of the index set. So now when I tap the edit button, I can see I have a delete button as well that will delete a row. In addition though, we also get for free a swipe action that we can swipe and then tap to delete. And this swipe, if I pull right across the screen, will delete as well without having to tap. But let's move these actions to our view model. So I'm going to create a function in the view model called move that's going to have the same parameters as our relations move function. And that's going to require a from offsets, which will be an index set, to a to offset, which will be an int. And then right now, here that we're inside of our view model, we can just directly go relations.move, where the from offsets is the from offsets coming from our view, and the to offsets as well will be the to offset. Similarly, we'll create a function to remove using at offsets with an index set. And then we can simply remove from relations at offset, at offset. And then I can return to my content view and simply change the for each loop to this using the perform and simply reference the view model's corresponding actions. Let me do exactly the same thing now then with the onDelete action. I just find this much easier to read and more concise. Plus, it keeps our logic in the view model where it really belongs. Let's just give it a test to make sure that everything is still working as it was before. Indeed, it does look like that. Let's take a look now at some swipe actions that were introduced in iOS 13. But first, I'm going to return to my person model and add one more property that I'll call immediate. And it's going to be a Boolean that I'll default as false. Now this won't require any changes to my relation sample, but I want to be able to change that if that particular person is a member of my immediate family. So back in our view, and within the H stack, I'm going to add a spacer and then a text view that will depend on whether or not if relation is immediate. And if it is, we'll present a text and we'll use an emoji like this one to represent my family. Now, nothing's going to change in the preview because currently all of my immediate properties in my array are false. So let's create a new view model function that's going to be called toggle immediate family. And it'll have one parameter, which is a person, and the action will toggle the immediate property. Now, this doesn't work because person is a constant, and it is just a copy of the person from our array, or the relation from our array. So we need to find when that is. And we can do that by finding the index of that particular relation, and when its IDs match, I can pick that specific index from my relations array. So we use a guard for this to let the index be the relation's first index, where, using this shorthand, $0.id is equal to the relation ID. Else we'll just return. But if it is, then we can find the relation's index value and then the immediate property that we can now toggle. So back in Content View now, we're going to add a swipe action. And that swipe action is going to be from the leading edge. And I don't want it to be a full swipe all the way through, so I'm going to allow full swipe to be false. Now, for the body or the action here, we're going to create a button with the label family. And the action for that button will simply be to call that ViewModel's toggle immediate family, passing in the relation that we're on. And I'm going to tint it to be a teal color. Now, if we test this now, we see that when we swipe from the leading edge, a teal button appears, and when we tap that, the emoji designating the immediate family appears on the right. So let's add a swipe action from the trailing end, and that's going to be the delete action. Now, I know we already have one, but you'll see why I'm doing this in a minute. We don't want to allow full swipe, so we want to accept the default, which is true, which will mean that we can delete this. And as the content, we'll create another button with the label delete, but I can specify the role as destructive. And this will prevent us from having to add a tint, as it will automatically color itself as a red button. Well, now we have those two delete options, one from the edit button and one from the swipe option. Now we can't use that function that we used for our edit function. We need to create another one because the edit function uses an index set, and we are right now inside the for each loop. So I'm going to return to the view model now and create a new remove function. Call it the same name, but I'm going to give it a different parameter. This time, we know that it's going to be a relation object that we are working on. So we'll pass that instead, just as we did for that toggle. Now, to remove the given relation, I can simply take the relations array, and then I can filter the array based on the ID not being equal to the given relation ID that I'm on. So if I return to my content view then, I can change the call to our delete function to simply ViewModel.RemoveRelation. So testing now then, we'll see that we can use either method for deleting a row. The problem, however, is that the swipe action is far too abrupt and not graceful. I want this to be a smoother transition. So to fix this, I'm going to go back to my ViewModels function, and I'll wrap that remove function in an animation block. In fact, I like animations so much, I'm going to add one to the toggle action as well for the immediate family as well. But this time, I'm going to specify a type of animation, and that will be an ease in. I'll set the duration to 0.5 seconds, but also add a slight delay of 0.25. So testing now, I can see that the transition is much more elegant. So now let's remove that on delete from the edit as it's redundant. And when I tap on the edit button now, there's no delete option. Yet swipe to delete still works fine. Now what I'd like to do is now change that edit button to a custom button that'll show the words reorder and done instead of edit done. So to do this, I'll need a state property that I'll call isEditing, and I'll initialize it as false. And now I can replace the edit button with a button, and the label will depend on isEditing. And if I am editing, it'll still say done, but if I'm not editing, it will say reorder. And then within the action, I can toggle isEditing. However, this doesn't put us into editing mode. I'm going to need to alter the state of the environment's edit mode. So I'm going to attach to that list modifier an environment. And the environment value is the edit mode. So if self is editing, edit mode is going to be active. Else, edit mode will be inactive. This does, however, require that this be a binding. And we can solve that by specifying that it is a constant. If I test this once more, when I tap on the edit button, it's now called reorder. I can reorder, and then when I'm done, it switches back to reorder. We're almost done, but I'd like to do one more thing. I'd like to display a number representing the index of the row that I'm on. And the way that I can do that is I can change my ViewModel relations array into an array itself. And then I can specify that it is enumerated. And when I do that, I now get an index as well as the relation. This creates an error, however, because we no longer have an identifiable array that we're going to need for our for each loop. And I can solve that by specifying that the ID is simply the offset, which is unique. And then now I can add a new item to our H stack that's going to be a text view. And the content of that text view is going to be the index plus 1, so that we start at 1 and not at 0. Then I'm going to specify that the font is a system font of size 24. The weight will be black with a rounded design. And then I can specify that the foreground color is gray. And so that the rest of my H stack will line up, I'll set the frame to be a width of 50. Well, let me test this now. We see that we now have a nice gray number to the left of our rows. Now, if I want to reorganize my relation so that my family is at the top, I can do that. Next, I can swipe from the leading edge to mark them as immediate. Then I can swipe from the trailing edge to delete those that are now deceased. Now, there's one more thing that I might want to do here to clean up our content view, and that is to extract this list row to a view of its own. So if I Command-Shift-click on the H stack, I can choose to extract it as a subview. And I'll call that list row. Now within the list row view, I get some errors telling me that the view model is not found. But I don't think that these swipe actions belong here anyway. I want them back in my list attached to this list row. So let's just move them back up there. Now I get another error in our list row, and it tells me that it can't find the relation property. So let's create that property, and it is of type person. Now we're getting the error that it doesn't understand what this index property is. So let's create an index property, and that's going to be an int. Now, of course, these two properties have to come from somewhere when the view gets instantiated. And we do that back in our view. So when we instantiate it, we'll need to pass in those two parameters that we're getting through our for each loop. And finally, we can move this view now into a file of its own name. Let's test this once more, but this time on the simulator. Yes, it's all looking good. It's even looking good in dark mode. Well, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this video and have learned something. If you did, please subscribe to my channel and ring the bell to get notifications. Thanks for watching.